Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities. Our mission is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living by offering unique and ecologically sustainable co-living options. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living, in addition to bringing you interesting people from around the world who are doing cool things to expand your knowledge and satisfy your curiosity. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life who want to enjoy the best of independent and group living. To find out more about us, please visit our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. Glad to have you back and glad to welcome back Ken Kleiber, who has Buck Creek Sanctuary in southern Indiana, near where I recently moved from in Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome back, Ken.
Well, it's glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Sure. So when we last left you, you were working on some conceptual aspects of your community. And I believe you visited an eco village up in New York that I've also seen. So I'm curious to see and hear about where you are at this moment with your plans.
Yeah, well, I'd love to share that with you. Basically, what I've done is come up with what's a basic permaculture design layout. And if you want to just jump right into it, I can pull that up. And then we can just walk through it into different aspects of it. And then, have questions as we go. That would be great. Good. So I'm just going to share my screen here. And for some reason, and we go right there. So yeah, this is Buck Creek Sanctuary. It's 58 acres. You can see it's bordered on the two sides, the top and then I guess the right side with farmers' fields. And then Buck Creek along the other two sides, it just curves around the south and the east side. And if you see the top right is Smith Campground Road, which is the access road. And then my driveway that comes all the way back down to the house.
And let me interrupt you for a second. Yes, your cursor will work. So show us.
Yeah. So we start here at the road and then to follow this driveway all the way back to the house. So this barn and this house is here currently. This driveway is all in. And I just want to reference, this is the high point of the property at the top of the drive. And you're going up and down, basically down, up, rolling hills, but generally going down all the way to the house. And then it drops off pretty steadily down to the creek off the back of the house. So if you notice, all the water that lands on this property goes to this creek, and no water from the farm on either side, which is, typical chemical farming. None of that water drifts onto this acreage here, my sanctuary. It all goes the opposite ways because of being the high point and going down. So that's one really important thing for me. You don't have to worry about drift and pollution from that area. But anyway, Buck Creek Sanctuary is a member of the United Plant Savers community of botanical sanctuaries, and one of the aspects we want to do with that is create an educational native and medicinal plant trail. So that is started here on the right. This is all forest. It's all hardwood forest of oaks, hickories, beech, maples, black walnut, sassafras, all cherry. You can name it. All this typical forest is in here. And then the understory is a lot of the native and medicinal plants. And so you can walk from the house all the way up to the drive up here. And in the spring, mostly, we'll have all these native and medicinal plants. And one of the biggest ones is the idea is to preserve the native and medicinal plants, because as the United Plant Savers has a at-risk list of native and medicinal plants that are at the risk of losing them, going extinct. And many of those are here at Buck Creek. And so we want to preserve that. And just to give you an idea, American ginseng, bloodroot, trillium. I don't know if anybody's ever seen bloodroot, but it's quite wonderful. So there's bloodroot, and it's a spring ephemeral, as well as most of these, and it's medicinal and can treat skin lesions. So that's a really important one. Trillium, golden seal, mayapple, trout lily, hairbringer of spring. All these are at Buck Creek Sanctuary, and many are on the list of at-risk plants. So we want to preserve those. So that's a big part of it. And then the other aspect is the permaculture design. So we're going to leave this part of the woods pretty native and just be more educational, and maybe timber some of that with the forester to keep a healthy ecosystem there. But that's kind of by itself. And then we got the main community and agricultural areas, the rest of this here. And basically, again, this barn to the house here is a little drop off. And that's going to be the garden going down in between the barn and the house, which is very typical of permaculture zone 1, the areas that you're going to be working in mostly, going back and forth from the barn. So that's going to be your annual garden, mostly on a hugelculture. So that's swales. So the yellow line is swales, and then in between the swales would be the gardening area. So the water, one of the most important aspects for permaculture is the design for water. So we're going to build this pond here, which again, all this is high ground here. And then this kind of is a gully coming off through here and down through here. And it feeds what would feed this pond. We would build the dam there. And then we'd like to put a house right there. So I know you'd be interested in this, is with the house, I wanted it to be a solar earth home. And let's see, there we go. A solar earth home that would be kind of, I got a picture here. Now imagine if that's the solar, it's not really an earth home, but if that was put inside onto into the side of a hill, so the hill would run here and on the other side, and the roof would be just over, out on the back is all you would see is the roof on the side of that hill. And that would look over the pond, and you could have your solar panels there. This would be the main kitchen. This would be an outdoor kitchen here. So I just kind of snagged this picture to kind of design that. I know you'd be interested in some of the design, a composting toilet that you would probably work with, all those kinds of aspects. And then it would just continue to go down to the pond, right? So
let me ask you this. Is there any level ground? Is it all sloping towards
it's
the
all
creek?
Yes, it's all pretty much sloping. Even so, it's all going down to some extent. So it really doesn't flatten out. It's either going down or coming back up a little bit and then going down some more kind of thing. So you're always dealing with that. And so that's why what you see the yellow lines is the swales, is to catch the water as it runs off, as well as the pond can then feed it.
Talk about, and I'm going to massacre the word, kugelkultur.
Kugelkultur.
Say it again.
Oh, it's not in here. Okay, hugelkultur is Hugel, Hugel, Kultur, it's German word, Kultur, Hugelkultur. So it's basically building a swale. So a swale, imagine this is obviously going downhill here. So you dig out this swale and pile it here. And the hugelkultur is the wood. So these little circles are actually logs. So imagine logs going perpendicular there. So you would take the logs. We're going to take some of the trees out because in this area through here, this is all cedar and needs to get thinned out so that we can put our food forest in and our pasture in and all that. So we would take that and basically the branches, the logs, all the organic matter, and make a pile, and then take the topsoil and put topsoil over that. So the water is going to run off water fill line. It fills up that culture and slowly seeps back in and keeps this whole garden moist. And here's your food forest where you're going to plant your nuts and your nut trees or your bigger trees. Here more your understory trees, and then maybe your fruit trees, then your bushes and berries, that kind of thing. And then all within there is underneath is your herbs and your perennials like blueberries, raspberries. So you got your apples and fruit trees, and then elderberry. You can just, the more diverse, the better. So if you can imagine, this is like the cross section, and then this here would be this green, so the food forest. So that's going to be a hugelkultur right all the way through there. Hugelkultur, and planted with those trees. And then the light green is pasture. So that's going to be pasture across there. So the water can come out of the pond and follows that ditch, that swale, and then fill it up all the way down through here. And eventually it just soaks in and keeps that hugelkultur bed, hydrated as necessary. I mean, you can have a faucet, for lack of a better word, a dam. There's what kind of dam is it called? I forget. That you can basically open and close and to fill that up off the pond. And that would be the same thing to get to the garden down here. So it's just a mini version of the same thing would be in the garden. And then you have your annual beds in between the swales down here versus your pasture here. And then I just took a course on silvopasture, SYLVO pasture, which is pasturing. Like silvo is forest, Latin for forest, and then pasture. So it's pasturing in forest. So the idea is to pasture in between. You got your shade, and then some of your apples, nuts, we're going to fall in here, and the animals, I mean, sheep, cattle, hogs, pigs, whatever you choose to pasture through here. And it would be a rotational pasture that they would go across small pastures and just gradually cross here over time and clean it up and then start back over again, right? And let it grow back. So it'd just be a few days at a time in any one section and then come back. And let me show you a picture of that. So here's the sheep pasturing in the meadow and the trees, right? So you have either sheep, cattle, it could be hogs, could be chickens, could be all of the above at different times, however you want to see that. So that would provide, basically you're providing all your food sources for the community and then also for sale. So it's both for the community and for profit or for income with the community. So that's basically how the food forest and the silvopasture works. So if that makes sense, if you have any questions about that or anything.
No, really interesting. And well, I do have a question. So the water flow from the lake, would it just be going through the trenches? Would you have some piping, or it's all open?
It's all open. Is from this here. So that'd just be a check dam. That's what they call it. A check dam is what you can close it, and then you just open it, and it just fills that ditch all the way across. This could possibly,
is there enough water to have some available by the time it gets to the end?
There's a way, yeah, I mean, that's all, yeah, who knows? It would be part of the design. Yeah, you'd be designing, yes, more than likely, yes, because of the amount of flow that you would release by the dam would fill this up before it would start saturating in, right?
Okay.
Go ahead and let it flow, fill up, stop it once it gets down there, and then just let it seep in over time. And that could be, a few days before it's, yeah.
And maybe have
So-
the walls of the pond elevated so that you can capture as much water as you can. And when you drain water out, that it's not totally draining the pond.
No, it would never drain the pond. So look, the dam would be like down, this probably isn't a real good drawing. The dam would be down here, and this should probably be a little higher. So that, can you imagine that? So the fill line, it's never going to drain the pond, basically. It would be at a point where when this point is dry and it can't fill anymore, there's still a good portion of the water in the pond, if that makes sense, right?
Okay.
So that's design, is where you put that. And let me show you. I got some more pictures. So they also, part of the design with the pond is manyfold. So it's for water for the food forest and the garden. It also can be a swimming pool for the community. So in the middle of the pond, you're going to have a really deep section. This is more of a small pond, but the concept of having a swimming area in the pond. So you would have a deep area in the middle of the pond, and then you would have different other levels where you would grow food as well as just plants that help clean the water, like lily pads and cattails help keep the water clean. And they're also edible. So both cattails are very edible and very helpful. And then the other aspect of this which is really cool, is just an idea of a pond island. So this is Jeff Loughton, who's a major permaculturist here, and he's got all kinds of things growing here on the edge of his pond, but he also has a island. So you see the hoop lines there. Can you imagine that's like a square? I didn't mean to do that. And then you put you got that shade cloth or something that would hold dirt in it, and it's outlined with a flotation, mostly bamboo that floats. So you build a frame of bamboo, cover it with shade cloth, fill it with a little bit of soil, and then plant in it. And you let that float out into your pond, and that's got a lot of your edible greens in it that you can then pull in to the shore, harvest, and send them back out into the water. So it's water-loving greens. Again, increasing diversity of your diet and also helping the pond diversity.
Sort of like aquaponics in a pond.
Pond, yeah.
That's cool.
So there's so many ideas, yeah.
What about residences?
And then,
what are you thinking about in terms of residences and number of residents? And if you've got more on the permaculture stuff, don't let me interrupt you. Get to it when you want.
You go to residents. So there's this house here. Now they started to do that. So that would be my house right now, which is down here in where I'm at, is just a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 950 square foot building, which isn't much. 2 people could live here. Well, unless you really like tiny houses and do more. So we got this house, which I kind of hit on a little bit, and this is just the beginning of the design. I couldn't find a really good earth home, but I wanted it, into the house. This would be kind of more the community building. The idea would be more of a living area on this side with bedrooms and bath, a community kitchen, community area here, and then again, another area over here with another family dwelling, bedrooms, that kind of thing. And the second floor could also be that way, more living space versus community. And then would love to have a community kitchen outside where you would host gatherings as well as process all that food coming from the food forest in the garden out front here. And then have communal meals here. This would be basically the community central for people. And then, I wanted to get rid of this one, not that. And then we go back here. So right now, this property is only designed or is zoned for 2-family dwellings. So I'd have to rework the zoning, and I don't know, that would be a trouble with the neighbors, but eventually it might happen. But if you look at these little red blocks, these are tiny homes that I have designed in here. So there'd be a tiny home right up above the other side of the pond from there. And then another one up above the creek. This is all dropping off to the creek again as the forest starts here. Is another, this could be there's a really beautiful set of trees over here. I want to do like a tree house there. And then a real remote tiny house over here. So those tiny house structures could all be different. It would be different, right? So from cob construction to cordwood construction to earth homes to straw bale construction. I mean, you name it. It would just be kind of a educational thing. So you could host different educational, how to make these different buildings as an educational workshop and have those built over time and then use those as dwellings as part of the community. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Have you had any discussions with local zoning people? Let's say, are you in Harrison County?
Yeah, I'm in Harrison County, and I know there's tiny house regulations as well that I have not gotten into. That's probably the next step. What I'm under the impression that if it's not habitable, if you're not living in it full time, it's not really has to meet zoning, but I should probably look into that. And also the other option would be to keep them so that they're movable, so that if they say, oh, this is, not fit for whatever, and you have to take it down, they can just move it, right? Instead of, but I guess the next step really is to really research that and to follow zoning. There's, a lot of hard luck stories about people doing stuff and then realizing after the fact that it wasn't part of the zoning and they run into all kinds of trouble.
Yeah, especially I've been reading a lot about shed to home conversions, and I think we may have talked about it at one time. And there's some regulations, about wind load and anchoring and all that stuff. So yeah, and it sounds like you've got neighbors who could complain, and that's the way they would find out about it.
So when the farmer next door who owned this property initially had it zoned, agreed to the zoning of 2-family dwellings on this property. And part of the reason why it can only be 2 is because if you go back up to the access road, look how small the access road is. I mean, it's like 30 or 40 feet. And so it's kind of crazy. Look at all this acreage that doesn't have any access to any road, right? Or no frontage, right? So zoning is based on frontage, road. So we had to actually ask him to sell us a little bit more land here so we got more frontage to be able to get it zoned to have 2 dwellings on it. And that's how, and we might be able to go to zoning and say, hey, look, frontage doesn't really matter to the rest of this property. How can we, change that? But he was pretty adamant. I mean, this is his family farm. I'm pretty much surrounded by one family, and they want to keep it, rural and not have this go into some kind of more, they're probably more afraid of, the typical multifamily, more of a
Subdivision.
subdivision, right? Yeah. But even so, he would only go up to 2. He's quite aware of the zoning. So if that changed, I'm sure he would find out about it and want to know more. So it's really about getting good neighbors, right? Being a good neighbor both ways.
You seem really most interested in the permaculture principles. Does your community depend on either financially or socially depend on having a certain number of families on the living there?
Right. I mean, I would like to see 3 to 6 is what I would say. Probably like 6 to 10 or 12 people at this point, until we go into some major zoning change. Would have to be limited to that. The other 2 things that I'm really researching as part of building community is it's for me, it's going to be a permaculture based community, and also looking into, studying nonviolent communication, which is, the more I get into it, the more I love it. And that being a foundation of how to build a community of human beings. And then also looking more into sociocracy, which I mentioned, I think, to you earlier. We haven't had much of a conversation about that, but that seems to be those 3 principles, or those 3 concepts, are going to be the basis for building community for sure. Before we go there, let me finish up.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, finish up just the trail system. So there's also, we also are are part of, right now we have a little campground, basically through Hip Camp, which I don't know if you're familiar with Hip Camp, but basically it's like an Airbnb for campers. So we got campsites on the river here, or on the creek. Here there's a teepee in the middle of the cedar forest here, and then there's a smaller campsite here. And people can just come on out and camp and hike around through all the trails right now and enjoy walking the creek. And most of the spring and summer, we've had people here on the weekends. If or go, somebody canceled this weekend, was supposed to be here, but it's just it builds community and gets my word out there and brings in a little income as well. So then there's this whole other trail system. This is all existing here. The only trail that doesn't exist is this one through up on the top here that would kind of connect the educational, native, and medicinal plant trail all the way around the property. So that's this winter's project, is to finish that up, but all the rest of these are in place. So anyway, that's the basic design, and I can close that out, I think, unless you have any other questions about the actual picture here, and then we can get into it more.
Well, why don't you just leave it up, and we'll,
okay,
because other topics may relate to it. Define sociocracy.
Well, that's I should ask you. This is a new concept for me, but what I understand it to be is it's a democracy in a circle, right? So there's no hierarchy. It's based in a circle and everyone having a voice, and based more on it's not your typical, hash it out until you get consensus model, but it's more of everybody gets a voice, and the idea is based in a respect and ultimate. The foundation is we are committed to basically nonviolent communication, is the way I see it. Communicate lovingly and nonviolently, and then working together. So as we work to, that's the commitment. And the idea isn't to get to some goal, and it's not efficient and, whatever, but to build community. So it's there to build community and not necessarily to accomplish. It's not so accomplish oriented, though it is, but in a roundabout way. But basically, everybody gets a voice in a circle. It's broken down into committees, and you come up with a committee to run. Come up with a plan for that. But then, as a vote, the idea isn't that, okay, we're voting on this, and then we got to do it. The idea is, when we come to some kind of consensus, is that this is as good as we can do right now for what we know, and it's safe enough. It's close enough to our vision that we can take that next step and start implementing it. And there's always open to re-looking at it and okay, is this really doing what we want to accomplish? Or does it need to be adjusted, or do we need to just stop? And so there's this built-in model to reevaluate without the judgment, without this. We already made this decision. We got to do it no matter what kind of authoritarian view. So it's not that authoritarian concept of. It's just more community building. I didn't do a real good job because I'm just learning about it myself. But that's kind of the concept that I understand now. Do you have more info? Are you familiar?
No, actually, that's the first I've heard of the term. You can sort of infer from that. Well, here I'll stop sharing the screen and we'll just go back to us. There we go. Okay. So, and it sort of reminds me of one of the methods of mediation where it's not so much focused on getting to a decision. It's more focused on the process and making sure everybody hears one another and gets a say. So I'm familiar with it. It's not as results oriented as some other processes.
Respecting each other and building community. I mean, that's what it's all about. And so when that's the focus, how you go about doing stuff isn't such a hot topic, right? It's not so loaded. Oh, we got to do it this way because, blah, blah, blah. I have these values. Well, if the value is community and peaceful communication, that's the value, right? And basically, we can go back to this. So I went to visit this Ithaca or eco village of Ithaca, New York, and that's who introduced me to this concept. And they said they use sociocracy, and I'm like, what? So then I had to go research that.
So tell us a little bit more about your visit.
Yeah, they're a community that started in I can't remember, late 70s or early 80s. There were over 300 acres, and most of it is still farmland. But over the years, they built one original community, which looks kind of like a subdivision. So it's a community. Rather than roads, there's walking paths. So you come in through a driveway through the farm and get to the living area. And then you've got a parking lot outside in the edge of the community. And then you walk to your house, and then there's all these paths walking to everybody's homes. And then they've got food forests and all that in between the houses. And then the yards are not your typical yards, but gardens and beautiful art and very beautiful. And most of them, it's based on solar. So they're all solar panels on the roof. And then that was the original community. I'm not sure how big. Right now, there's, I think, upwards to 250 members, people living there. And so
I saw a really good YouTube video about it. It was over an hour long, an interview with one of the founders. I'll see if I can find that and we'll put that in the show notes, unless you know the one I'm talking about. Actually, it's a woman who's with a farm, I think, in Missouri, and that was another one that
The Dancing Rabbit Farm. I'm aware of those too. I want to go visit that one, but I haven't visited that one yet. And but this eco village of Ithaca then expanded again in the early 90s and built another community. And then rather than put solar panels on the roof, they built a solar field. What is that called? On the edge of the community, or on the edge of the housing community area, where they get all the solar, out in the field basically, and then run to the homes. And then in the early 2000s, again, they built another third community, or I guess 2010 area. They built a third community, and each has their own name, and each has their own little kind of focus of what they. One is more children oriented. I think one is more retiree oriented. One is more, I can't remember, but each community has a little bit different focus, but they all work together as one. And then several of the members run basically farm enterprises on the farm in the area. Like one of the farm enterprises is a CSA for most of the members of the community, right? So he has a CSA, and he's got a market right there, right? He's selling to all the members of the community. So that's quite a beautiful model there. And then one is basically a nursery of different nuts and fruit trees, and he sells nuts and fruit trees. And I forget what the other one was. It was a unique thing. And then there's one woman who's got Gourdlandia, something like that. She has a gourd business, so she makes art out of the gourds that she raises. It's just phenomenal. You should look into that. It's really cute. I bought some of those. But from the typical birdhouses to lamps to ornaments to all really cool things, and that's her business. She grows her gourds and then makes art with them, and then teaches that as part of workshops. And so there's just a lot of and a lot of the other members are employees or professors or work at Cornell University right there in Ithaca. So it's just a really neat area, right? Beautiful area.
The homes at the Ithaca property look, most of them big, and I understand that the Ithaca area is a relatively wealthy community, and this seemed like a relatively wealthy community in itself.
Yes, I would say definitely. It's more, the buildings aren't necessarily earth homes or anything like that. They're pretty conventional built, but based on solar and mostly low carbon footprint as far as energy use is concerned. So your typical very well insulated, that kind of thing, good design, passive solar design and that kind of thing, but pretty typical as far as a regular house living area. Yeah.
It may have just been the focus of the interviews on YouTube that I watched for those two communities, but Dancing Rabbit seems to be a little more process oriented. And the YouTube video I thought was excellent, with interviews from the individuals about how they relate and how they operate committees. The scope of the Ithaca YouTube video was more about the physical layout, and I sort of got the impression, I interviewed one of the founders, and I sort of got the impression that they were a little more physically focused than Dancing Rabbit, who was a little more process focused.
Yeah, Dancing Rabbit is very much, it seems like, more dedicated to alternative living styles. They're going to do a lot of different earth buildings. They're really good at, I think it's cob construction, cob building. One of the members there is a master cob builder, and my friend Bill Wilson, who is from Midwest Permaculture, and he's got his Stell community in Northern Illinois, and they had him, one of the members from the Dancing Rabbit, the guy who does the cob construction, come and do a workshop and build a cob constructed building on his property. And so Bill introduced me to Dancing Rabbit and said, you ought to go check them out. So it's still on my list to get to. I just couldn't work it out. They were a little tight during COVID. They weren't holding their tours, but now they got monthly tours, I'm pretty sure, again, where you can come and stay for 3 or 4 days and kind of act like you're part of the community and learn the process. So they got a pretty strong code of ethics. It might be they might be calling it something else, but there's like, okay, if you're going to live here, you're going to live based on these. And one of them is like, I think, not owning a car, that you're dedicated to just, they own like 3 cars amongst them or something, and they, share them, and, different things like that are, it's pretty intense and like a big commitment. When you read it, it's a little bit overwhelming. Okay, this is a change in lifestyle, right? Yeah. So
I got the impression that Ithaca was a lot bigger than Dancing Rabbit. It's been going on longer. I think Dancing Rabbit just a couple years old.
I think it might be, yeah, it's like 2010, so maybe 10, maybe 15 max.
Okay.
Yeah. And basically, yeah, it's a different model. I think you own your own property. I think you actually buy and sell your own property, and it's not community owned. They don't own 300 acres. I think it's a lot smaller than the 300 acres. And I think it's just more of a co-op. I can't remember. It's been a while since I researched them. It was in the spring that I was thinking of going there. And, but there is something about, owning, there's just a lot more regulations around Dancing Rabbit, and a bigger commitment, it seems like, to community. And it's smaller. I think there's only 15 or 20 people that live there right now, or that's all that they have
One thing
for.
that impressed me about Ithaca, or I don't mean impress me, but a point that one of the founders made, was that she found that about 30 residences, 30 families was a good number to have a sense of community where everybody knows each other, and everybody, it's not too big to prevent getting things done. But she also said that if it's too small, then, and she didn't say this, or she said it in a very polite way, that people get in each other's business a little too much if it's too small. So she was saying that they found that the ideal size was about 30 residences or 30 families. And I think each of those 3 separate communities within the whole property, I think that's about the number that they had. Because that's something I really focus on, is what's enough to have a vibrant community where people are sharing, and there's this, I know this from mediation, that there's or mediation training, it takes a certain number of people to have a group, you know what I mean? And if it's too small, it doesn't feel like a group. There's not group dynamic discussion. So that really impressed upon me, finding that ideal balance. If it's too big, you would have to divide it into groups. And she said that for the most part, people that live in one of the 3 communities, this is Ithaca, pretty much stay within their group. Some bounce around, but that they're in their 3 groups primarily. So I don't know, any other takeaways you had from either?
Yeah, designed that way to that each community is separate and has a separate identity, as I kind of mentioned. And they're probably roughly about that size. They seem a little bigger than 30 houses each. But you 60 no, probably not. I mean, right, so you get 90 houses and there's 2 people to 3 people per house. That's 250, people. So yeah, it's probably about right then. So, and it seemed, yeah, definitely very neighborly and very, just talking to a few people that we ran into over the days there, other than the initial host, our initial host, who kind of filled us in on the details. But they have a community garden in one where, anybody in that community can have their little plot. And then the other ones didn't have that. See, they had more of their yard and developed into their own personal community. So each one had just a little bit different. So they had their own autonomy to be able to do that, to do what they want and create their own community. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a council, or no, they were committed to consensus. So I guess just their own operating group. How long were you there?
Just for 2 days. So
and did you stay on the property?
Yeah, we were host in one of the buildings, and I mean, like I say, it was just a typical home. If you were, once you're inside, you wouldn't know you were in anywhere other than your typical American built house, right? And as far as furnished and that kind of thing. But outside was totally different. The neighborhood, the community garden, all the food forestry, the yards, the art, it was in the paths, instead of roads in between each house. And then they do use some sociocracy. He was, their own version of sociocracy, I guess, is what they would say. And that's how I got introduced to the concept. So, yeah. And then the couple that hosted me was, he was the founding member in the original community. And then they ended up selling that and then buying and moving to the second community and wanting to do that for some reason. I can't remember why he said they did that, but yeah, he had been there from the beginning, and it's pretty amazing that somebody, I mean, that's his whole life, right? I mean, 1980 something till 20, that's 50 years or something of living there. That's pretty amazing.
Recently I had a meeting with a zoning board in one of the counties that we're interested in. And I was amazed. Now, this was within the city limits. I was amazed at some of the requirements. For example, roads that are big enough for a fire truck to come into and turn around. So, and I didn't, in the video, I didn't see that kind of infrastructure for Ithaca. So I guess they'd have to have it waived.
They have their own fire hydrant or fire water availability in the community. I forget. I remember seeing it and either them mentioning it, but yes, that was very much a part of the community. That each community had to have access to enough water for fire prevention, a fire in case of a fire.
But not necessarily a fire truck to be able to get down in it, because it looked like there were just paths between houses.
And I think basically that was just in between houses, but you could, on the outside of those houses, you could get to it.
Okay.
So you didn't see the back side of those houses. You were just in the middle, and there's just a circle of houses that can all interact. But on the back side, that's where all the parking and the roads are. So the fire truck could get in.
Were they in a circular pattern? I haven't looked at the Google map. Or were they sort of hodgepodge?
It was more rectangle. It was more of a rectangle.
Okay.
I think the one was more rectangle. The newer one might have been more circular, I think. I can't remember, but yeah. But fire truck access was definitely part of the design. And and the roads were definitely big enough to get in and out like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting here. Oh shit, because my access road is not that great. Again, for 2 dwellings, yeah, but not to multiple.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you just did you just go talk to who did you talk to and the zoning commission, something or other?
Actually, it was a committee of all of the actors that are responsible for sewage, utilities, fire. I mean, it was a virtual meeting. There were like 16 people in there.
Wow.
And I found out through them various ones shooting it down that the property was in a flood zone. It just totally blew my plans up. But it was a good learning experience. And I've got contacts in each of those departments that I can follow up with if I go to that county. One of my takeaways from watching both of these videos about Dancing Rabbit and Ithaca, and I will make sure that we get those videos in the show notes. But I felt so comforted that between those two communities, there was nothing that was not part of my concept already. They were doing it. And sometimes, and I'm curious to see if you feel this way, sometimes I feel like I'm operating in a vacuum. Most people, the concept is foreign to most people. It's sort of counterculture. So I felt really supported, and especially with Dancing Rabbit and those interviews, that they were really committed to finding great ways to build community, to support one another. It was both communities had the same feel and vibe that I envision for our community. Did you feel supported? And
yeah, definitely. It is pretty phenomenal to go visit. Ithaca has been there for 50 years, right? I mean, it's like they've done it, and one of the guy that my host was like, it's harder than you think, but we did it. It's like, it's always, we made it, right? It's not, we kept committed to it, and here it is. It's like, wow, it can be done. So sometimes, you wonder if it can ever happen. So yeah, very much so. And I'm sure there's more out there to learn. And it's like, don't try to, and that's part of what Bill introduced me. He says, you need to go talk to Dancing Rabbit, right? Because it's like, you don't reinvent the wheel here. Go start visiting these places. So that's what I've been doing. And it's been very, very helpful. Yeah.
And both of them incorporated the main principles that I'm valuing, multi-generational, sustainability, solar, all those things. I'm also was struck, I think both of them use the term eco-village. And I'm liking that more and more. In fact, we're considering a name addition to be Thrive Co-Living Eco-Villages. I think it's a little more descriptive. And whenever you talk about co-living, the focus seems to be more about the interaction, and eco-village seems to infer the sustainability, and not, they do seem to be focused on building community, but it's not in the name. You know what I mean? Right. I guess village, but.
Cool. Yeah, the co-living seems like more roommates, right? And not necessarily focus on building community, where the eco-village kind of, I don't know, it just feels like it incorporates that more. Yeah.
Yeah. And co-living has usually meant living traditionally. You can't say traditionally, it's not been going on that long, but it's usually infers living under the same roof, and co-housing is more about separate facilities, like Ithaca and Dancing Rabbit. But I don't like the
Right.
term co-housing. I want to
Yeah.
use co-living for both, because
Mhm.
I want more integration and more of a sense of community that co-living infers, I believe.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I just like village seems to incorporate the other than human world, right?
Yeah.
Co-housing, co-living kind of is more human centered for me. It's
Mhm.
almost too human centered for me. Is that the other big principle for me is incorporating the other than human world as far as in realizing we're part of nature and not separate from, and we have to learn how to live as part of nature. Yeah.
So any other aspects that you have been working on, feel like you have a better handle on since we last talked?
Mhm.
Just fill us in. Has your vision changed since you visited Ithaca? Where are you, and are you ready to start gathering other people to build this thing?
Yeah, I definitely want to use this this design and start promoting it and gathering other people. The biggest thing for me with my trip to Ithaca was the incorporation of the silvopasture. So, and how to do that. Part of the trip was Cornell University had put on a silvopasture farm workshop where we visited 6 different farms in that area right around Ithaca that were incorporating silvopasture, which means basically food forest, and then incorporating forest and pasture, basically. So animals into pasture. So it could be and how to do that. So that was really, really helpful. And so that's where you didn't see the word silvopasture on my design yet because I haven't redone it, but that's going to be incorporated in it. And I always had that in my head, but never had the details, that necessarily that word and that level of concept of the concept is being a bigger part of the community. Yeah.
Mhm. I think when you
That was
incorporate animals, it makes for more complexity. Then you have the vegetarians and the vegans who are drawn to this concept. What do you do with the animals? Do they live out their lifespan? Do you kill them? Do you eat them? It involves some extra complexity, I think, socially.
absolutely, and that's where permaculture, I mean, has to be a foundation because you have to understand that the animals are part of the ecosystem, and to me, eating meat is part of the cycle of life, and that's going to rub people the wrong way, and those people aren't going to necessarily be a part of the community. I mean, I unless they can accept that other members are free to eat meat, and I choose not to have that kind of autonomy is important, I think. And so I wouldn't be exclusive, but they might exclude me, right?
Yeah. My
That
guess
kind of
would
thing.
be that the key would be, are there animals being raised for food? And
Uh-huh.
I think if people were eating it, but not growing and harvesting it, it probably would be easier for a vegan to accept, or vegetarian to accept.
I'm totally the opposite. If I'm going to eat meat, I want to grow it, and I want to know it's been loved and taken care of and fed properly, and through the whole life cycle. And then I can celebrate its life by eating it, which sounds wacky to some people, but to me, it's like it's so foundational as part of living with nature.
Yeah.
I mean, nature is, is other animals eating other animals, plants and animals. It's and within a community, there's a larger community within that we have to embrace, and not see it as a violent act in and of itself, but it's all part of a dynamic. living universe. You got black holes and you got, bright sunny sunshine. The black holes are just absorbing, whatever. We don't even understand the concept of what's really happening there, but supposedly is destroying, whatever life, but it's just part of life. So that aspect is all part of nature, and somehow, I think that's part of honoring nature, honoring natural law.
When I first moved to the country, I was thinking very much the same way. And I thought, it's hypocritical for me to eat meat if I'm not raising it, taking care of it, and killing it. And that led to my first foray into vegetarianism, because I could not kill a chicken. So, and I could not envision butchering a pig or any of that. So it was that act of killing that I could not do. And it makes a lot of meat eaters, including me, who's gone back to it, a bit hypocritical, I think. So I get your point, but it would be, I predict it would be definitely a point of contention if you've got the two there, just because I'm familiar with a lot of vegetarians and vegans. And I'll also make the point, and I was included in this, just an observation, there's nothing meaner towards humans than a new vegan. Have you noticed that?
Yes, and we can all be self-righteous in our own decisions and how we approach things. And to me, comes back to nonviolent communication and how to live your life. And again, someone, a vegan or vegetarian, thinks that killing is a violent act, and in and of itself it is, but it's part of a living dynamic system. And you can say picking that apple is killing that apple. I mean, where do you stop? I mean, it's like you either acknowledge that life is a cycle, and life, part of life is dying and death, and honor and respecting that and honoring it, but not by not doing it. There's a difference, and we lost contact with the art of dying in our culture. We don't have that, and so we have this overreaction, to my view, to death and dying. And we got to incorporate that and honor that as the cycle of life. And
so
that's what.
Anything else that you'd like to bring up about your vision and the execution of it? We'll get to contact information in a moment, but I just want to give you a chance to wrap up with anything that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything. As I mentioned, it's basically permaculture, nonviolent communication, and sociocracy. They all have a holistic approach to life, and living in circles and cycles, and honoring the cycles versus a linear, above down concept that our culture is based on. And that's the focus that I want to take in whatever form it is. But if it's living and honoring life and cycles of nature, then that's the direction I want to go. So yeah, and they all seem to be doing that. So thanks for this opportunity to share all this with you and help process in my mind and get it all straight.
Sure. So if people want to reach out to you, let's give the name of the website, any other contact information that you'd like to share.
Yeah, email is just buckcreeksanctuary@gmail.com. Our website is buckcreeksanctuary.org. And the Facebook page, Buck Creek Sanctuary, just look up Buck Creek Sanctuary. So yeah, that's pretty much everything.
What about the camping rentals? What was that site?
That is HipCamp, HIPCAMP, hipcamp.com. And you can search Buck Creek Sanctuary on there and come for a visit. Yeah, if you email, get on our mailing list, when we'll have workshops coming up. We have an appreciation workshop or appreciation day coming up on Sunday, October 23rd, I believe it is, the 23rd Sunday, from 1 to 4. It's kind of an open house and appreciation day where we're going to do a front porch stage. Some friends of mine are going to be singing. We'll do a little tour. We'll have lunch. Hopefully it'll be a beautiful day. The colors are just beautiful this time of year. So it's just, not this weekend, but the following weekend. October 23rd, 2022. I don't know how long this will live in eternity. But yeah, and then for the winter, I'm not sure. We don't have anything scheduled until probably next spring before we do something other. Well, we do have the second Sunday of the month, which is actually this coming Sunday. We always have forest bathing. So we'll have a Sunday morning forest bathing from 10:30 to 1, where we'll just gather as a group of people and do a little meditation and bathe ourselves in the beauty of the forest, and in different ways, silent meditation, or just many different activities that we can do to connect with nature and this beautiful property here. So that's every second Sunday of every month. So,
can they reserve campsites through your site, or do they have to go through Hip Camp?
It would be best to go through Hip Camp, because and I'll just send them to Hip Camp if they want to come to me initially, because that's where basically the insurance, that's what they offer. The Hip Camp is, the insurance of having campers on your property.
Got
if
it.
you're going to be a guest. I have insurance for day trips and day people, but for overnights it's through Hip Camp. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's plan to talk regularly and get updates on how things are going, maybe quarterly. I think that's about what the amount of time that's elapsed so far. But thank you so much for sharing your vision and your enthusiasm and your knowledge about permaculture. It's really appreciated, and hopefully, and I bet it's valuable to a lot of our viewers and listeners. So, all right, thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. If you want to find out more about Thrive, go to thrivecolivingcommunities.org. There are all sorts of things in the show notes, ways that you can contribute to the podcast and to the community. We're a not-for-profit. Also ways to connect with Ken and his organization. So we'll keep having these every week. So tune in, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Ken. Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.